Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another instalment of Revisiting, where I look back on one particular album. So in today's episode we're going to look at this record. This is the Beach Boys, Summer Days and Summer Nights. Although on the back, interestingly, I was just noticing earlier on, it actually says on the back the Beach Boys are swinging with Summer Days and Summer Nights. So don't think that's the official title though. So this album I discovered on CD back in the mid-1990s, and I guess the Beach Boys had been on my radar for quite a while at that point. Like most people, I got into Pet Sounds via reading music magazines and being told that it was the greatest album of all time. I've always been slightly agnostic about Pet Sounds. I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that it's the greatest album of all time. I sort of sometimes think it's the best Beach Boys album, other times maybe not. It's clearly a milestone in popular music, but yeah, well, let's not get into that debate now. That's maybe a discussion for a different video. But this record, I got it in a CD box set, a kind of cheapo CD box set with replica covers. It was this, The Beach Boys Today, and Smiley Smile. I was living at the time in Leeds in a rather crummy attic bedroom, and I can remember listening to those three CDs over and over again. There was one weekend in particular when I was suffering from some horrible lurgy that I'd picked up somewhere. I couldn't go out, couldn't move off my bed, you know. So had these CDs on rotation, and I loved all three of them. And but this one, there was something about this one that particularly grabbed me. And when I was doing a little bit of research for this video, I came across a quote which brilliantly sums up what I think of it. It's from the online journal Rocksucker. So they included the album in their list of the 10 most underappreciated Beach Boys LPs. In fact, it got to number 4 in that list. And they said, it's an inconsistent collection of which the high points are truly great and the low points ranging from merely good to just about passing muster. And that's kind of what I think about it. It's one of those records where there's a handful of tracks that are so great that it doesn't really matter what the other songs are like. In a way, it could literally, the other tracks could be Brian Wilson, reading out the phone book. And because this handful of tracks is just so stunning, it's always going to be a great album. And that really is what I think of it. So I'll explain in a moment which tracks they are, but you probably know already if you're watching this video. Just a few facts about the record, and let's see what we can learn about it. So it was their 9th album, incredibly prolific band. July the 5th, 1965, it was released on Capitol, and it was pretty successful. It got to number 2 in the US, and in fact it was the highest chart placing in the US they ever had, apart from the first album, their first album, Surfing USA, back in '63. It was also a big hit in England as well, got to number 4. Now what had happened was, the previous Beach Boys album, which was Beach Boys Today, that record really was Brian Wilson, I think in particular, trying to work himself free from some of the expected tropes of Beach Boys legend, writing songs about surf, girls, cars, that kind of thing. He was trying to branch out. He was clearly trying to spread his wings, and the album, even though it's a great album, didn't really sell that well. It was a bit of a flop commercially. So Capitol basically put pressure on Brian to get back on track and do another sort of straight down the line, middle of the road Beach Boys album. Let's go back to some of these surf songs and just try and get some good feeling up again. So Brian essentially agreed to that, and predictably Mike Love was firmly in the driving seat. Most of the songs on this record are written either by Brian on his own. There's a couple of tracks which are just by Brian. Most of the tracks are by Brian and Mike Love, and whenever Mike Love is present in the writing credits, you're always going to get a fairly traditional Beach Boys album. So that was the thinking behind it. It was to try to do something much more mainstream, and that really is what the album is, really. But it's interesting because Brian's sound, his conception of this form of what would you call it, almost post-Spectre pop music, very symphonic, pocket symphonies, just immensely complex and layered productions, but done in a deceptively disposable sounding pop music formula. This record really does demonstrate that, because some of the material is quite pedestrian, but you can hear You can hear Brian's burgeoning genius coming through in the arrangements, even on the lesser tracks. I mean, the first two songs on the album I was never impressed with back in the day. The Girl from New York City and particularly Amusement Parks USA, to me they are almost what I don't like about the Beach Boys, that kind of formulaic sound. Those songs that sound a bit like they've been specifically constructed to be adverts for the Californian Tourist Board, in a way, advertising some of the fun activities that you can do if you go for a day trip to LA, say, for example. And they just don't do much for me, but you can't argue with the production on this record. Even on those two tracks, you listen to them and you think, my God. I mean, clearly you've got the great musicianship, the Wrecking Crew musicians are there, but the sound of the record, it sounds amazing. So it's not the best start. Then it goes into Then I Kissed Her, which is an old Phil Spector song, wasn't it? It was Ellie Greenwich and Jeff Barry, one of those old as the hills songs. But the arrangement on that, you can definitely start to hear again. Yeah, Brian is really, he's coming into his own. Brian had started using recreational drugs around about this time. He'd started using cannabis and acid as well. A couple of tracks were written, I think, composed while he was tripping. And it's the parallel story with the Beatles, obviously. George Harrison always said when you start to imbibe these substances, it turns your ear on. Essentially it makes sound more interesting, more compelling. It gives you a different perspective on what can be done with sound, and you can hear that coming through, even on the lesser tracks. Now, the album starts to pick up seriously by track 4, Salt Lake City, lead vocal Mike Love. It's not a great song, but it's got a fantastic instrumental section and some truly amazing backing vocals at the end, or harmony vocals at the end. That was always one that I just thought, wow, that sounds incredible, even though the song is not brilliant, But then, the first truly fantastic song on the album comes around, and it's Girl Don't Tell Me, which I got a feeling maybe that was a Brian solo effort. And it was released originally, it was the B-side of Barbara Ann, and Brian wrote it when he was on honeymoon. I mean, it's difficult to describe how incredible the tune is of that song, Girl Don't Tell Me. I mean, it's yearning, it's melancholy, it's sugar sweet, but it's not saccharine. It's just beautiful. It's the kind of song, it's the kind of tune you can imagine Brian he sat at the piano, he's playing, this tune just comes down from the heavens. It's fully formed, it's beautiful, it's just absolutely perfect. And it's a song which, it does make me emotional listening to it. It really takes me back to a particular time in my life where my life was not particularly great at the time. There's all sorts of personal problems going on and things with work. And it was a pretty dark time in many ways. And this is one of the records, and that's one of the songs that was kind of like a ray of sunlight, really, coming into my life and just making me realise just the amazing possibilities that pop music can afford. So short and sweet, but just so wonderfully done. I guess the only thing about the song is lyrically, it's maybe a little bit dodgy. It's kind of seemed to be a song about a guy who's basically lusting after a teenage girl in tight shorts. But this was the 60s, And then Help Me Rhonda at the end of side 1 is a remake, actually, of a song that had been on the previous album, The Beach Boys Today, but it's a much, much better version. It's more upbeat, the arrangement is tighter, it's a bit faster, I think, and it's so infectious. It was a great driving song for me back in the 90s. I used to drive around and have, windows whacked down, Help Me Rhonda blasting out. It's one of the Beach Boys' most glorious pop moments, really. This particular remake on this record, anyway, just fantastic. Now, side 2, this is where you get into the real quality. So the side opens with California Girls. Now, the opening to that song is just one of the greatest moments in pop music. Just the way that Brian arranged that introduction. It sounds like the door opens and you get this glimpse of this musical vista, this genius, this incredible conception of music. But it's just a few seconds long. It's just an introduction going into this upbeat, finger-clicking pop song. It's just immense. It never ceases to amaze me when I hear that introduction. And the song itself, I must admit, if I had a choice between having California Girls on a Desert Island and, say, Good Vibrations or any of the songs from Pet Sounds, I would probably go for California Girls. The vocal arrangement is peerless. Those banks of harmonies, the way he I mean, they're expansive and they're amazing, but they're also compressed down and used in this radio-friendly pop format. Then it goes into Let Him Run Wild. Now, this was a B-side. It was the B-side of California Girls, actually. And this is the other one, which is just so beautiful, so fragile. It really paints a picture of an emotionally fragile young person who's basically in love with somebody, and he's watching them. He's watching this girl with this other guy, and he just wants to cry. You know, it's such a heartbreaking sight, seeing them together, seeing them walking together, seeing them talking together. He's watching them, and his heart's essentially broken. And the melody, again, it's just one of those fallen from heaven tunes. You know, just imagine writing a song like that. You can sort of see why Brian went mad, really. I mean, just that weight of melodic genius coming down on him from above. Definitely one of my favourite Beach Boys songs, one of my favourite songs of all time. It's incredible. And then you've got this. This is an interesting track, "You're So Good to Me," which it's quite kind of it's quite rocky. It's quite raw sounding. And I think it represents Brian's other side, the side which is maybe a little bit less mellifluous, you know, a little bit more gutsy. Again, a fabulous tune. It was the B-side to Sloop John B from Pet Sounds. And really, those maybe four or five songs, Girl Don't Tell Me, Help Me Rhonda, California Girls, Let Him Run Wild, and You're So Good to Me, they make this album a classic, I think. Everything else is kind of, you know, window dressing or maybe not quite so great, but those tracks alone make this album essential. And then it sort of tapers off a little bit. You've got an instrumental, Summer Means New Love, which it's okay. And then you've got this slightly unhinged song by Brian called I'm Bugged at My Old Man, which is done in this kind of pseudo Fats Domino style, and essentially it's just Brian singing in this rather unhinged voice, complaining about the fact that his father's cut off his hair, locked him in the bedroom, and is pushing bread crusts under the door. It's a hilarious song. I mean, it's not Brian's greatest, you know, moment as a songwriter, but it's kind of entertaining. It's just a shame in a way that it comes after that run of great tracks, because really you can't really follow songs like Let Him Run Wild and You're So Good to Me, but you know, even so, it's fun. And then the record just ends with a short a cappella song called And Your Dream Comes True, which is just a bit of sentimental pop fare, really, you know, nothing special. So that's the album, essentially. I think the Beach Boys today is often seen as more of the connoisseur's choice. This is the popular alternative. But if you don't know this record, if you've only heard Pet Sounds, because that's the one that everybody says that you should listen to, I would definitely say check this one out. It's much more fun than Pet Sounds, much more upbeat. Doesn't take itself quite so seriously, I think. It's lyrically more shallow, but it's just very catchy. It's fun. It's really tuneful, just a wonderful, memorable album with some true highlights and some other stuff which is maybe not quite as good, but you know, the great stuff is so great, who cares? Anyway, so that was that. The Beach Boys, Summer Days and Summer Nights. Hope you enjoyed the video. Leave some comments, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care. Bye.